We begin in the world of politics. Breaking news in the Nebraska governor's race. First Alert 6 has confirmed former state senator Brett Lindstrom is officially jumping into the race, but not as a member of his longtime party.
Yes, Lindstrom is launching a petition drive to get on the ballot as a nonpartisan. He needs at least 4,000 signatures spread across all 3 congressional districts to qualify.
Lindstrom, a longtime Republican, changed his party affiliation to nonpartisan earlier this year. That was around the time he dropped out of the race to replace Don Bacon in Nebraska's District 2 race. Lindstrom joins incumbent Republican Jim Pillen, Democratic nominee Lynn Walls, and Rick Beard with the Legal Marijuana Now party in the race for governor.
In an email to First Alert 6, Lindstrom says, quote, "Our state is facing a pivotal moment in terms of how we manage our budget and create opportunities for future generations, and Nebraskans deserve one another." A statement from Governor Pillen's campaign reads in part, quote, "Simply, there's no path forward for a career politician like Lindstrom. In the past 4 years, he lost a governor's campaign, applied to be a U.S. senator, quit a congressional race, switched parties, and is now scheming up a workaround to see his name on the ballot once again."
Democratic nominee Lynn Walls' campaign also weighed in, saying Brett Lindstrom is a lifelong conservative Republican who recently switched after an unsuccessful congressional bid. Now he is trying to mount a campaign as an independent after re-registering at the deadline. His record speaks for itself. He is no moderate.